What's up, everybody? So, this video is actually going to try to explain, from what I've discovered, how you are considered a corporation or a vessel under civil law. Okay? So, in my readings, I came across a gentleman named Admiral Horatio Nelson, who was part of the British Navy in the early 1800s, and they were the ones who fought. He basically was, before he died, he was responsible for dismantling, or at least mitigating, the French Revolutionary Navy at the Battle of Trafalgar. Trafalgar is a big situation in the early 1800s because it gave Britain legitimate naval superiority, which was the hyper expansion of colonialism or colonization across the world. With the assistance of the Monroe Doctrine, the Russian-American Corporation and England were banned from trading or setting up ports in the Americas without going through a British port where they paid their port fees. And this is all the East India Trading Company and the Flying Dutchman, stuff like that. So, and the Battle of Trafalgar is a huge situation that happened in the early 1800s. 1803 or 1805, I'm pretty sure. So even before the War of 1812, which means that the British Revolutionary Navy had been basically mitigated, or the English Navy had been mitigated, and the French Revolutionary Navy had been mitigated by Britain prior to the War of 1812, which is probably what emboldened Britain to invade America, was that now they had the power of the Navy, and basically the East India Trading Company, through their commercial trade system of port fees or tariffs, were actually like the high-powered Navy that they became, the Royal Navy. So this is really important because you got to think about how trade and commerce worked and how trade and commerce does work. Okay? And I've already made comments about how, like, we operate in this civil system, but the civil system is actually consumer law, which is Indian law. So what's interesting is maritime law is British. It's owned by British. The Cook Islands, the Marshall Islands, those are British. The Marianas, the Federated States of Micronesia, where the World Health Organization legislature is, that we have removed from, British. Okay, so these British colonial expansion, hyper-colonial expansion, is we are seeing the results of it. What we couldn't fathom was the concept of the word impressment. So the British used officers that were elected. They had the word commander-in-chief on their admiralty, and they used a process of impressment. Now, we would call that enslavement, but you change the word and it doesn't mean the same thing. When you go to someone's ship and you go on their ship and by force at the threat of a gun, and you take crew off that ship and put them into service under the quote-unquote king, you have enslavement, which is impressment. Okay? It's the same thing. But they use the word impressment. Now, if you study Horatio Nelson, the life of Horatio Nelson, or Nelson's Trafalgar, which is another book, or the Sea of Words, which is referenced in Nelson's Trafalgar, you will find out that what happened was they weren't just stopping American commercial vessels, they were stopping anyone that they came across. And you can watch a movie, can't remember the movie right now. I know I posted on my Telegram. But it's about this situation. And what happened was there were so many nationalities of individuals on these ships, and a lot of them were illiterate, and a lot of them were there. They were basically imprisoned on these British warships to fight the war against the French, that the languages got like just merged, and all of these strange words come out. And Nelson's Trafalgar, the book, elaborates on the word like junk. Like we thought the word junk meant something. It means something totally different. It's very interesting. So if you take this concept, then you have to take the concept of impressment, which means you are serving the King's Navy. That means it is a courtesy to serve the King. You're not there under labor. You're there in servitude, which means you had to pay to serve the King. You had to pay tax. So you were considered a cargo, or a vessel in cargo, in transit, serving the King in service to the kingdom's benefit. Does that make sense? Unless you were commissioned, and then you had value, you had rights. So this is really interesting. Or unless you earned rank, because you were rank and file, right? So this goes back to our current system today of paying taxes on our houses, or paying taxes on our vessels, which is our vehicles. So, and it's really interesting because the word channel actually means chains. It comes from the word chain, or connection, right? So that's a channel, and that's why we have river channels, and that's why we change channels, right? Because they're being broadcast, right? So all these words have power, all these words have meaning. So I would recommend the book, Nelson's Trafalgar, if you want to learn more. But essentially, until you had ascended in some way to receive your civil liberties, you were considered an infant that had to be ruled. And this is where the whippings, let the poundings continue until morale improves, right? Let the beatings continue, stuff like that. You were like a farm animal. You were considered cattle, and the cattle had to be ruled, right? They had to get a bit, and they had to be ruled, and that's what, because they had all these people that they merged together in servitude, enslavement. Because I'm going to leave you with this. What is slavery? Slavery is a connection, direct or indirect, between two entities where one entity has the ability to force the other entity to actions or non-actions, whether that be in speech or physical kinetic action, without the mechanism of recourse. In other words, without the right to petition a third impartial party for the sake of righteous or justice. That is slavery. And anything other than that's what it is. You can call it impressment, you can call it servitude, you can call it employment. That's what it is. You have a right to sell your labor. You have a right to be paid on the payroll, not receive income. You're not receiving income. You're being paid on the payroll. Payrolls come out of treasuries, and income is granted. Okay? When you have the right to own property, and that right includes your rights, you have the right to petition, and you have a court, and you can seek the facts, you're not a slave. Otherwise, you're a slave. God bless, Godspeed.